Welcome to Valor Conversations. I'm your host, Jay Trainer. Valor Conversations is powered by CSB Ministries and is the official podcast of Christian Service Brigade. For more information, please visit csbministries.org. And now, on with the show. Hello, friends. We continue to venture forward in our series for Valor Conversations called Brigade Tune-Up. It's all about gearing our units up for the new ministry year coming this fall. There are, of course, many resources and things available that many leaders are not aware of. Some things we miss, some things we overlook for whatever reason. Well, we want to share these resources with you. We don't want this podcast to be a quote-unquote how-to guide. We want others to share their own experiences using the resources ultimately available to them that they've engaged with. Joining in the conversation today are two men who take a couple different approaches on the issue of relational development. Alex Mull and Mark Fiscus lead and disciple young men in Unit 8034 in Stillwaters Presbyterian, both serving as battalion captains. Guys, welcome aboard. Let's talk about relationships, an often overlooked element to discipleship and maturity in the Lord. Couple questions to get us started. Why don't you both just share about how you were brought into the world of Brigade through relationships, first and foremost, and specifically, how did you get involved by being on the receiving end of a relationship or connection in the first place? And Alex, I'm going to hand it over to you first to describe that a little bit, and then Mark, you can jump in.
Thanks, Jay. So I actually was somewhat of a late bloomer. I did not come to faith until I was a freshman in college. And as I started to transition out of college, I wanted to get connected to into a church, and a gentleman at my church was at that point just starting a brigade unit, and so he asked me if I wanted to be involved. I had no idea what it entailed. It was kind of a yes and figure out what it was out later. But I started out as a ranger, and then after the first year, we started a battalion, and I started in as a lieutenant, and that was my introduction to brigade.
Kind of a crash course of sorts, it sounds like. Very cool. How about you, Mark?
I grew up in a family where Christian Service Brigade was life. It was a lifestyle. My dad was instrumental in starting Brigade Unit. I think it was 1726 or something like that out in Western Pennsylvania. So it was a while ago, back in the 1960s. And he worked the battalion. I started, of course, with Stockade. There was no tree climber program at the time. I remember that we always met on Monday night at the time. That Monday night was my most favorite time of the week. The relationships of Christian men, other Christian men speaking by life, were immense. I can honestly say that the mentorship I received at primarily Camp Hickory Hill, Christian Service Brigade in Western New York, was highly instrumental in preparing me to serve as an educator for over 4 decades, which I still am doing.
Wow.
So that's what Christian Service Brigade has done for me. It was a lifestyle, and I had the privilege of working with it over 30 years here locally. For a while I lived out in the Midwest where there were no brigade units, but once I got back here, I got involved again, and I worked with tree climbers, stockade, and battalion, predominantly battalion, because I work with middle school, so it's a natural
fit. Yeah. So when you were in the Midwest, just to kind of as a follow-up with that, you're obviously disconnected from relationships that were formative to you, and also disconnected from this way of life. How did you stay grounded, so to speak, during that time?
Well, I stayed active in the local church. For a while, I was down in the Ozarks in Missouri. So there weren't a whole lot of local viable church opportunities, but I did get involved there. It was a little different brand of Christianity than I was used to, but they were fellow believers, and I was involved there. I was a teacher there as well, elementary at the time, but that's how I stay grounded with in my Christian faith, as I stayed real active in the church. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, why do you think, this goes to both of you now, why do you think relationships are overlooked in different church and ministry settings today? And what are some of the specific distractions that you find that diminish the value and the need for relationships and connections in the first place? Mark, let's start with you on this one.
All right. I think some of the distractions would be the focus on numbers or results. And, oh, we had so many guys out for battalion, or we, had so many conversions, or, things like that. Focus on that kind of a thing rather than on a relationship. If you look at Jesus and his discipleship method, he spent 3 years living with the young men. They were young men, pretty much, a little older than the young men we work with, but still young men. And he mentored them on a daily basis. He walked the walk with them. He talked with them. He ate with them. He ministered with them. And I think that's the kind of a model that we really need. There are quite a few distractions out there. I mean, I was educated as an educator whenever personal computers didn't even exist. I use them in the classroom every day. My students use them. So things transition. But as an educator, I'm convinced that relationships are key. A student can learn something from an educator or teacher he doesn't respect or have a relationship, but not that much. Most people thrive. And if you look back in your days, you don't remember what you learned in a particular teacher's class. You remember what kind of relationship you have with that teacher and how that teacher impacted you one way or the other.
Good. Alex, how about you?
I think a lot of times, especially in the church, people are busy, but they're not, they don't spend the extra time to get to know folks that they work with. You can work with a whole lot of folks and work toward a common goal, and really, if you don't understand and reach out to, and talk to the other folks, you may not really get to know them. You work with them, but you don't actually build that deeper relationship that you can get beyond the how are you doing, and then they say okay. That type of relationship.
So let's talk about your own individual approaches and viewpoints to relationships. You are both two different leaders, two different individuals. How do you individually develop these connections in the context of your unit? And are there any specific examples that you can share with our listening audience about relationship development in action from your own way of developing relationships in the first place? Alex, let's start with you on this one.
I think for me, it's really geared towards really getting to know your unit and the young men in the unit. Is really understanding where they're at and what their interests are, and what they like to do, what they may not really enjoy all that much. It's I will go back to when I first started. All the guys in my unit, they love camping and hiking and all that kind of stuff, and for me, I had never really done any of that, and so it was but it was the right place to be. That's where they were interested in, and so I started to dive into that, and I got some lumps along the way and fell into a few creeks here and there, but getting to know them and being where they are is I think is really key.
Awesome. How about you, Mark?
I agree with Alex. Getting to know the young man, who he is, how he ticks, and that kind of thing is key to understanding him. In our battalion, we have a really strong mentorship program with the leaders. We are blessed with being able to include it in the regular weekly meeting. Not that we don't do things outside the meeting, but every week, I would say predominantly, we do have some weeks we have a special or something, but each young man spends 10 or 15 minutes with another older man being mentored. Sometimes it's just talking about life. Often it's, talking about the personal achievement and things. I have two young men I work with. One is redneck, if I can say it that way. He enjoys hunting. He is a hands-on kind of a young man. The other young man is
pumpkin. Pumpkin.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have some of those tendencies as well, so I can understand. On the other hand, the other young man I work with is highly intellectual kind of a young man. Two completely different approach, at what I can expect out of them, and how I can approach meeting with them as they work their achievement. It's not at the same level, and I have to understand that. And as a teacher, I've had lots of experience working with it. We have that. It's a special key term in education, differentiation. But you understand if you know where he is and what your expectations are, then you can say, this is what this guy can give me in this area, and that's the best he can give me. So that's acceptable. This guy can give me a lot more in this area, and so you have those kind of expectations. So they're completely different young men. So I can't just approach it the same way. One of the young men, he doesn't enjoy reading very much. So I sometimes read some of the things to him, or I encouraged him to get a Bible app, and he started listening to the Bible on his phone. That works, So that's one of the approaches we're looking at, is how to get to know your individual young men and what their interests are and things like that.
Let's talk about those common ground elements. You two both share the captaincy at your church with regard to battalion, and you provide oversight. You work hand in hand, you work together, but yet you are two different individuals. How have you both been able to find common ground, especially Alex, since you are newer, coming over from another unit in the last couple of years? And Mark, you had your way of certainly leading, and now Alex comes along and you mesh together. Talk about that dynamic a little bit, finding that common ground. And Mark, let's start off with you on that one.
Well, I'm always open to have other godly leaders mentoring young men, and it gave us a few more young men. So our battalion right now is the strongest size it's been in several years. Our church is a very small church. Actually, believe it or not, of the 9 young men who came regularly, one was from our church. So kind of just gives you an idea of where now we have 30 kids from like 4th grade and down, I think, in our church. So, out of the 100 people, 120 who come. So it gives you an idea of kind of the dynamics there.
Wow.
We Alex and I had the privilege of knowing each other for probably 15 years, Alex, or 20, something like that.
Something like that.
Not on a deep level, but we would see each other at battalion events. Our battalions were 15 minutes apart or something like that. The one I was working with at the time. So we knew each other a bit. So we had that going into it. I knew that Alex had some gifts that were stronger than mine, like in the tech part. So it's worked out really well having him do all the communication kind of things with our battalion units. That's really been very, very helpful for me, because I was doing that on top of everything else I was doing. So it took in fact, having Alex come on and share that actually took a load off me, and I can do a lot of the planning and where we're headed. And then I don't do it on my own. I mean, obviously I share it with the men, and we work on it together. But I'm always thinking in the background and then kind of lay it out, and then we can go forward. But Alex kind of does some of the things, week to week kind of things that really, really help. And I had a knee surgery and missed 2 or 3 months of battalion there. And that was really, really helpful to have him and the other men being able to come there. So
awesome. Alex, your thoughts?
For me, Mark is very much more accomplished than I am in terms of riflery and archery and things like that. So it's something where I'm still learning and getting better incrementally. But Mark has a ton of gifts in those areas, and so likewise for me, I was okay at it, but with joining the battalion at Stillwaters, our guys who came along, they got a lot of great wisdom and a lot of experience as well. So I've really appreciated the opportunity to work with Mark, and I will echo his sentiments. I think we both have strengths, and I think we complement one another very well.
That's awesome. So couple more questions as we begin to kind of wind down here. What advice would you give to a new leader in Brigade, perhaps at another church, or maybe your own church, where somebody new might come into the fold who may not have the best confidence in connecting with quote unquote new people in their group? How does one kind of overcome their own fears in this process to build relationship? What do you think? Alex, why don't we start with you on that one?
So I'm a introvert by nature.
You are, okay.
So it's a little bit different being in that position, but I think if you work at it and you spend the time, you don't necessarily have to go into deep life issues right off the bat.
Right.
Understand with the guys that you're with, hey, do you have a favorite sports team? What are your hobbies? And start to get to know them in that capacity, and then work stuff that you're interested in there as well, and build that relationship. It won't come overnight, and you have to work at it. I would also say consistency. I think one of the things with our battalion is with our leaders, just about everybody is there every week, and there's consistency for the guys, and being able to share, and even when things aren't great in your own life, being able to share and be real with them.
Awesome. Mark, your thoughts?
I would say for a new leader who's a little intimidated, I've had the privilege of bringing some men in, a number of men in over all the years I've worked with battalion, and most of them do not feel comfortable being up front right away, and that's understandable because especially if they're blue collar kind of guys, if they work in more white collar job, and they're a little more familiar with that kind of a setting. But even then, some of them are intimidated by middle schoolers. But anyway, I would say that one of the best things to do is just kind of get them in there and be a part, and don't expect a ton out of them for the first 3 months. Just come, and they can actually even sit with another one of the leaders as he mentors the young men, working with achievement, maybe have them help with games and things like that.
Shadowing experiences.
Shadowing, I think, would be a wonderful way to do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, don't just hand them a book and say, okay, you got counseling next week. Maybe give them some helps to see this is how you do it. I mean, I've been standing in front of people for last 40 years of my life, so that has no fear for to give a counseling to me. But some people, it's a very threatening experience. So I think it would be helpful. And the other thing is the experienced leaders can model to the other leader, then they can get a little more relaxed with it. I mean, I'm just thinking of some of the leaders we have right now who, when they first came in, were very intimidated and unrelaxed, and now phenomenal. And what I found is that some of the leaders who really struggle with like giving a counseling or something like that, or being up front presenting on a particular mission, are excellent at one-on-one mentorship.
Yeah, different giftings, different abilities.
Yes.
And serving in different capacities, right?
Right. But most men will get up front and talk about their passion. If it's fishing or computers or whatever it is, there you go. You can talk about computers. I'll show them how to shoot a gun on a bow. Okay, listen.
There we go.
That way. Yeah. So yeah, that's that
Well,
that I think is really helpful to kind of break them in on it. You don't throw them in the lion's den on the first night.
right.
Let them.
And I think it's really interesting before we started recording this not off camera, but
Yeah.
Alex, we were talking about just the different dynamics of how the different units kind of take on the personalities of their leaders and of the personality of the church too. And it's amazing to see that type of relationship and what that means, where, we are going to have different strengths and those come out, and we're going to have different weaknesses too. And
Yeah,
those also come out too along the way.
that's where we help each other at.
Yeah.
I'll take care of the line formations, and we'll let Alex teach the personal finance part. There we go.
There we go. So I
That'll
love
be
Yeah.
my thing.
Yeah,
I love
I will say when when I first started with battalion, the idea of getting up in front of everyone and doing council ring I was like, yeah, do I really want to do it? But you gain experience through doing it, and you realize that the young men they're not there to criticize your public speaking skills, or lack thereof. They want to get to know you as a leader, and putting yourself out there and being available. That's what they really want.
being relationally charged. That's so good.
And it is. They do. They're looking for men who invest in their lives, because, frankly, there are other people out there who want to use them, but most people really don't have their best interests in mind. And so when they see someone like that, they come back week after week. Sure, they get involved in all the missions we do and the sports, but they sit down and they learn memory verses and talk about life important things too. Which, some of them, we have a young man. We have a couple of young men in our battalion who don't have a father in the home right now. So, and one without a mother. So these are great opportunities for them to be surrounded by godly men who are pouring into their lives.
That's awesome. Yeah. Meanwhile, we'll have Alex sign up for my public speaking class at Roberts Wesleyan that I'll be teaching in the fall.
There you go. There you go.
I've gotten past it now.
Yeah, he does a nice job.
Mark, take no mercy on me. When it's my turn, it's time to go.
That's awesome. So I'd love to hear from both of you what measurable or tangible way identifies successful relational development within your unit. In other words, to speak in churchese for a second, church lingo, what is the fruit of successful connection with leaders and young people in your unit? The fruit of it. What does that look like? What does that culminate and lead to? Alex, why don't you get us started? Sorry, I should have queued you up.
That is a very interesting question. I think it's when you start to be able to relate to a young man in a real tangible way. Like there are guys that I can in our group that I can come up to and how are things going? How was your week? And how are you doing in art class? And those are real tangible relationships, and that's really where the rubber meets the road, when you can ask, you have the ability to ask because you've worked with the guys, and they're giving you an honest answer.
That's awesome. Mark, how about you?
I think the fact that when you have 15, 16-year-olds that keep coming back every week, you have a victory of sorts, because at that point in time, their parents aren't making them do that. If I can say it that way, they're coming because they want something that they are getting on a weekly basis there. Like one young man that I was talking about is his life has been transformed. He's being raised by his grandmother, and he's actually serving the summer at one of the Christian Service Brigade camps as a counselor.
Phenomenal.
Where he was headed and where he came from was a very sad story, but his life and his men over the years, many men have poured into him, and through the battalion ministry, and going what he got at the local, and then what he got at Camp Haycock with the leadership training there, and then going back as a counselor, being surrounded by godly men the entire summer, has been transforming his life.
Yeah, David and his team down there, they do a good job with their seasonal staff and whatnot. Having had a chance to chat with him in a previous episode, actually, of Valor Conversations, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So here's the toughest question of them all, and this is what we're going to leave it with. Do you guys have any final thoughts or words of advice that you might have for our listening audience? So it's kind of open-ended. Alex, any final thoughts that you might have, and then we'll wrap it up with Mark.
I think what I would start with is be intentional with the time that you have. In a lot of contexts, Brigade is an hour and a half, every Monday or Wednesday, or whenever your church has it. But be intentional with that time and use it to, focus on the guys and what their needs are. It's not a hey, you have to do council-ring, you have to do lineup, if sometimes those things fall by the wayside because you are spending time with someone, be intentional and be flexible.
Awesome. How about you, Mark?
As far as the words of advice, I would say that one of the key ingredients is pray. I pray for each leader and each young man in my battalion a certain day of the week. That's my prayer in the morning, that I specifically pray for each of the young men. And the other thing I would say is that I think leaders need to understand that leading a battalion is very important. I passed up the opportunity to serve as an elder in my church because I felt it was more of a calling to train young men to serve the next generation. So I think that people need to understand I'm not saying everyone should do that necessarily, but you can't do both. But with all I do in the school setting and things, I couldn't do all three things. So I had to make a choice, basically. And I think people need to understand how important speaking into the lives of young men is. And there are surveys that show that it's not just one person speaking into the life. So in other words, a parent can't just be alone. It takes, I think, about 5 adults speaking into a young person's life in order to really make a difference. So if you need to surround your teens with godly men and women who are speaking into their lives for Christ's kingdom, if it's a young man, it needs to be men.
Yeah, awesome. Well, guys, thank you for your time and sharing about your own experiences with regard to relationship. It is truly appreciated. I love getting to see the snapshot as to how the Lord is using you guys and others throughout the United States and Canada with regard to this discipleship ministry called Christian Service Brigade. And I hope and pray that as you begin to focus on your next ministry year, guys, that your continued use of relationships will further advance really the discipleship efforts that you are ultimately trying to accomplish. Thanks for tuning into Valor Conversations with your host, Jay Trainer. Valor Conversations is powered by CSB Ministries and is the official podcast of Christian Service Brigade. For more information, please visit csbministries.org. And in the meantime, stay tuned for more Valor Conversations coming your way soon.